My name is Peter Dillard, and I'm 42 years old. For 7 years, I worked as operations manager at Helix Dynamics, a mid-sized tech company based in Cincinnati, Ohio. I wasn't the flashiest guy in the room, but I was the one who kept things running. While others chased promotions and played office politics, I focused on delivering results, consistent results, the kind that don't make headlines but keep a company alive. I had a solid team. Good people who respected me because I respected them. We met deadlines, exceeded targets, and solved problems before they became crises. I didn't need praise. I needed purpose. And for 7 years, Helix gave me that. Then Trent Lawson showed up. Trent was 39, fresh from some corporate consulting gig, and hired by the board to modernize operations. From day one, he made it clear he wasn't interested in how things worked. He was interested in who bowed down. Loud meetings, aggressive emails, public call-outs, that was his style. He wanted fear, not respect. I wasn't afraid of him. That became my problem. It started small, passive-aggressive comments during meetings, dismissive looks when I presented data. He'd interrupt me mid-sentence to redirect the conversation, always with that smirk on his face. I kept my cool. I figured he'd burn out or move on. Guys like Trent always do. I was wrong. 3 months into his tenure, we had our monthly leadership meeting. The whole team was there, about 15 people, gathered in the main conference room. I was presenting an update on a logistics overhaul we'd been implementing. Numbers were solid. Everything was on track. Halfway through my presentation, Trent stood up. "Peter," he said, cutting me off. "Can I stop you right there?" I paused. "Sure." He walked to the front of the room, hands in his pockets, that same smirk plastered across his face. "I've been thinking," he continued, looking around at everyone except me. "This company needs a new direction, fresh energy, people who understand where we're headed, not where we've been." I knew what was coming. I could feel it in the air. The room went silent. "Your time here is done, Peter, effective immediately. No warning, no private conversation, no explanation. Just public humiliation wrapped in corporate speak." I didn't react. I didn't yell or argue or defend myself. I simply looked at him for a long moment, then at the faces around the table. Some looked shocked. Others looked away. Nobody said a word. I stood up, closed my laptop, and gathered my things. "Understood," I said calmly. Then I walked out. If you enjoy stories of cold-blooded revenge and gripping plot twists, like this video and subscribe to the channel now. There are brand new, unreleased stories here every day, each one more intense than the last. As I packed my desk, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I'd learned. 7 years of loyalty meant nothing to people like Trent. Competence didn't matter. Results didn't matter. All that mattered was whether you played the game. I left Helix Dynamics that afternoon in early December 2023 with a box of personal items and zero illusions about corporate life. I also left with something else, something Trent couldn't see, a quiet, burning resolve to never depend on anyone's approval again. The next few months were rough. I applied to dozens of positions, got a few interviews, nothing stuck. Word gets around in this industry, and when a high-profile firing happens, people assume there's more to the story. They don't ask questions. They just move on to the next candidate. My savings started to dwindle. I cut expenses everywhere I could. Canceled streaming services that ran about $15 each. Stopped eating out, saving roughly $400 a month. Drove less. I wasn't panicking, but I was running out of runway. One evening in late February 2024, after another rejection email, I drove to the corner store to grab some groceries. On my way out, I passed the lottery counter. I'd bought Powerball tickets before, maybe once or twice a year. Never won more than a few bucks. I bought one ticket, $2. Didn't think twice about it. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in my living room scrolling through job postings when I decided to check the numbers. I pulled up the Powerball website on my phone and compared them to the ticket sitting on my coffee table. All 6 numbers matched. I stared at the screen, then at the ticket, then back at the screen. $68 million. After taxes. I didn't jump. I didn't scream. I just sat there, letting it sink in. Then I made a decision. Nobody was going to know. The next morning, I contacted a law firm that specialized in lottery winners. They walked me through the process. Anonymous claim, asset protection, trust setup, everything designed to keep my name out of the headlines. Within a month, the money was secure, and I was off the radar. No social media posts, no interviews, no celebrations. I'd already deleted my Facebook account months earlier, stopped answering calls from old colleagues, and now I started studying. Not how to spend the money, how to invest it. I wasn't interested in yachts or mansions. I was interested in control, independence, the ability to never be at someone else's mercy again. While I learned about investment strategies and asset protection, part of me couldn't stop thinking about the one company I knew inside out, the one that had been my professional home for 7 years. That's when I started looking into Helix Dynamics. I spent the next several weeks doing research. Deep research, financial reports, industry news, LinkedIn profiles, quarterly earnings calls. I wanted to understand what was happening at Helix Dynamics after I left. What I found didn't surprise me. The company was struggling, badly. Within 6 months of my departure, 2 major clients had pulled their contracts. One cited operational inconsistencies. The other just said they were exploring alternatives. In corporate speak, that means things fell apart. Trent had made bold moves. Aggressive cost cuts, layoffs in key departments. He reorganized teams that didn't need reorganizing and replaced experienced people with cheaper, greener hires. On paper, it looked decisive. In reality, it was chaos. Helix Dynamics was a private company, but financial data leaked through vendor reports and employee gossip on industry forums. Revenue was down. Investor confidence was evaporating. There were whispers about a potential sale or merger. I kept digging. I found out that the board was getting nervous. Trent had promised growth and delivered decline. He'd promised efficiency and delivered turnover. The numbers didn't lie, and neither did the exodus of talent. People I'd worked with for years were leaving, heading to competitors, taking institutional knowledge with them. Helix was bleeding out, slowly but steadily. And here's what I realized. The company itself wasn't the problem. The infrastructure was solid. The client base was still there, just dormant. The technology was competitive. What Helix needed wasn't a revolution. It needed stability, experience, someone who understood how to run operations without burning everything down. Someone like me. That's when the idea started forming. Not revenge, not payback, something bigger. I contacted a private investment firm in Chicago, boutique operation, the kind that specialized in distressed acquisitions. I laid out the situation. Told them I had capital and wanted to explore purchasing a controlling stake in Helix Dynamics. I didn't mention my history with the company, just presented it as an opportunity. They did their own due diligence and came back with a proposal. If I put up $40 million, they could secure additional backing through leveraged financing to acquire 70% of the company. That would give me operational control and a board seat. More importantly, it would give me the authority to restructure leadership. I agreed. The whole process took 4 months. Lawyers, intermediaries, financial audits, negotiations with existing shareholders. Everything was done through shell companies and legal representatives. My name never appeared on any preliminary documents. As far as anyone at Helix knew, some anonymous investment group was interested in buying them out. The shareholders were desperate enough to take the deal. The process moved faster than usual because they'd watched their equity lose value for over a year. An acquisition at even a modest premium looked like salvation. The sale closed in early September 2024. 70% ownership transferred to a holding company I controlled. The press release was bland. Helix Dynamics announces new investment partnership to drive growth and operational excellence. Standard corporate nonsense. Nobody knew I was behind it. Not yet. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit like. It helps the channel a lot. I gave it 2 weeks, let the dust settle. Let people speculate about who the new owners were and what changes might be coming. Then I made my move. On a Tuesday morning in late September 2024, I walked into Helix Dynamics headquarters for the first time in nearly 10 months. I didn't announce myself, didn't make a scene, just walked through the front doors like I belonged there. Because I did. I owned the place. The receptionist didn't recognize me at first. Then her face went pale. "Mr. Dillard." "Hi, Rachel," I said calmly. "I'm here for the leadership meeting." She stammered something about not having me on the schedule. I smiled. "I'm on the schedule. Trust me." I took the elevator to the 4th floor where the executive conference room was located. The board and senior leadership were already gathered. Monthly strategy review. Same meeting format where Trent had fired me 10 months earlier. I opened the door and stepped inside. The room went silent. Every head turned. I could see the confusion on their faces, then the recognition, then the shock. Trent was sitting at the head of the table. His face shifted from confusion to anger in about 2 seconds. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded. I walked to the empty seat at the opposite end of the table and set down my briefcase. "I'm here as the new chairman of the board," I said evenly, representing the majority shareholder. The room erupted, people talking over each other, questions flying. Trent stood up, his face red. "This is a joke," he said. "Someone get security." "Sit down, Trent," I replied. My voice was calm, almost boring. "You'll want to hear this." One of the board members, an older guy named Harold, leaned forward. "Peter, is this true?" I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. Inside were the acquisition documents, ownership transfer papers, and a letter from the legal firm confirming my authority. Harold scanned them quickly. His expression changed. He looked at Trent, then back at me. "It's legitimate," Harold said quietly. Trent was still standing, gripping the edge of the table. "You can't do this." "I already did," I said. "Now sit down. We have business to discuss." He didn't sit. He just stood there, breathing hard, trying to process what was happening. I opened my briefcase and pulled out another document, a termination letter. "Trent Lawson," I began, keeping my tone professional. "Effective immediately. Your position as Chief Executive Officer is terminated. Per the transition clause in your employment contract, and in full compliance with Ohio employment law, you'll receive 2 weeks severance and standard benefits continuation. Your company property, including laptop, phone, and access credentials, will be collected by the end of the day." I slid the letter across the table. It stopped right in front of him. "Security will escort you out once we're finished here." The room was dead silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Trent stared at the letter like it was a snake. I caught a few glances around the table. Some looked shocked. Others showed barely concealed relief. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. And for the first time since I'd known him, I saw something other than arrogance in his eyes. Fear. "You did this because I fired you," he said, his voice tight. "No," I replied calmly. "I did this because you ran this company into the ground. I fired you because you're bad at your job." He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it. He looked around the table, searching for support. Nobody met his eyes. Finally, he grabbed the termination letter, crumpled it in his fist, and walked toward the door. Before he left, he turned back one more time. "You'll regret this," he said. I showed no emotion. Just watched him leave. The door closed behind him. The room stayed quiet for another moment. Then Harold cleared his throat. "Well," he said, "I suppose we should discuss the transition plan." I nodded. "We should. But first, I want everyone here to understand something. I didn't buy this company to settle a score. I bought it because I know how to fix it, and that's exactly what we're going to do." Over the next hour, I laid out my plan. Operational restructuring, client recovery strategy, talent retention initiatives. Everything Trent should have done, but didn't. By the end of the meeting, the mood had shifted. People were asking questions, taking notes, engaging. For the first time in nearly a year, there was a sense of direction. As everyone filed out, Harold pulled me aside. "That was one hell of an entrance," he said. "It needed to be clear," I replied. He nodded slowly. "You know people are going to talk about why you really did this." "Let them talk," I said. "The results will speak for themselves." And they did. The first 90 days were critical. I knew that. When you take over a struggling company, you have a narrow window to prove you're not just another problem. You're the solution. I didn't waste time. My first move was reaching out to the 2 clients we'd lost. I knew both CEOs personally from my years as operations manager. I called them directly. No intermediaries, no sales pitch, just honesty. "This is Peter Dillard," I said on the first call. "I'm back at Helix and I'm calling to understand what went wrong." There was a pause on the other end, then a laugh. "Peter, I heard you got pushed out." "I did," I said. "Now I own the company, and I want to fix what broke." That got his attention. We talked for 40 minutes. He laid out every operational failure, every missed deadline, every communication breakdown that happened after I left. It was worse than I thought, but it was also fixable. "Give me 90 days, I said. "Let me show you we're serious. If we can't deliver, you owe me nothing." He agreed to a trial project, small scope, tight deadline, a test. We delivered it in 70 days, under budget, above expectations. The contract came back. Not the full original scope, but enough to rebuild trust. The second client followed a similar path. By early January 2025, we had both relationships back on track. Over the next 6 months, we recovered nearly 40% of the contracts lost under Trent's leadership. Internally, I focused on stabilization. I reversed some of Trent's cuts, bringing back key personnel who'd been laid off. I didn't rehire everyone, just the people who actually moved the needle. The ones who understood our systems and could train others. I also made changes in leadership, not dramatic ones, surgical ones. I promoted 2 mid-level managers who'd been overlooked. I restructured reporting lines to reduce bureaucracy. I instituted weekly operational reviews, not to micromanage but to catch problems early. People responded. Morale started shifting. It wasn't overnight, but you could feel it. The tension that had hung over the office for months began to lift. By March 2025, revenue was trending up. Not dramatically, but consistently. We were winning new contracts, retaining clients. Our employee turnover dropped by 40%. The board noticed. Harold pulled me aside after one quarterly review. "I'll admit," he said, "I had doubts about this whole thing. Thought maybe you were just settling a personal grudge, but you actually know what you're doing." "That was always the plan," I said. He nodded. "What happened to Trent, by the way? Heard he landed somewhere." I hadn't been tracking Trent, didn't care to, but curiosity got the better of me, so I looked him up later that week. Turns out he'd taken a position at a startup in San Francisco, some tech company trying to disrupt logistics. He lasted 3 months before they let him go. After that, his LinkedIn went quiet. No new position, no updates. His reputation hadn't survived his failures. When you burn through companies the way he did, word spreads fast. People talk, references matter. And when the pattern becomes clear, the opportunities dry up. I didn't take pleasure in it. I just noted it and moved on. My focus was Helix, not Trent's career trajectory. By September 2025, about a year after taking control, we were profitable again. Not just stable, but growing. We'd exceeded our annual revenue target by 12% year over year. The board was happy. Investors were happy. Employees were happy. I stayed hands-on but not overbearing. I didn't need to be the face of every decision. I built a strong executive team and trusted them to run their departments. I focused on strategy, major client relationships, and long-term planning. The company culture shifted too. People stopped looking over their shoulders, stopped worrying about political games. They focused on work, on results, on collaboration. That's what happens when leadership actually leads instead of performing. Around October 2025, I got a call from a former colleague, someone who'd been at Helix during my original tenure but left after I was fired. His name was David Parsons, and he'd been one of the better project managers we had. "Peter," he said, "I heard you bought the company. That true?" "It's true," I confirmed. "I also heard you're hiring." We talked for an hour. He'd moved to a competitor but wasn't happy. The grass wasn't greener. He wanted to come back. I brought him back. Not because I needed him specifically, but because I remembered how good he was. And because he represented something important, proof that Helix was a place worth returning to. Over the following weeks, 3 other former employees reached out. People who'd left during Trent's tenure. People who'd heard things were different now. I didn't hire all of them, but I hired the ones who fit. The company's reputation in the industry was changing too. We started getting mentions in trade publications, not as a cautionary tale anymore, but as a turnaround story. How Helix Dynamics recovered from near collapse kind of headlines. I didn't do press interviews, didn't chase publicity, but I didn't stop it either. The story was simple and true. Good leadership matters. Experience matters. Stability matters. We were also preparing to expand. Plans were in place to open a satellite office in Austin, Texas early next year. We'd already hired 15 new people in the past quarter. We were launching 2 new service lines that leveraged our existing expertise. I still thought about that day sometimes. The day Trent fired me in front of everyone. The humiliation, the anger, the uncertainty of what came next. But I didn't think about it with bitterness anymore. I thought about it as a turning point. The moment that forced me to stop depending on other people's validation and start building something I could control. Would I have preferred to stay at Helix and avoid all of this? Maybe. But that wasn't the reality I got. The reality I got was a lottery ticket, a struggling company, and an opportunity to prove that competence beats arrogance every single time. One afternoon, I was walking through the office when I passed the main conference room. The same room where Trent had fired me. The same table, the same chairs. I stopped and looked inside. A meeting was happening. My current VP of operations was presenting a quarterly update. People were engaged, asking questions, contributing ideas. It looked like a healthy company, because it was. I kept walking. Recently, I got an email from Harold. He was stepping down from the board due to age, but he wanted to meet for coffee before his last official meeting. We met at a place downtown. Small cafe, quiet corner. "You've done something impressive here," Harold said. "I've been on a lot of boards, seen a lot of turnarounds. This one stands out." "Appreciate that," I said. He stirred his coffee, thoughtful. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "When you bought the company, was it really about fixing it, or was it about Trent?" I'd been asked this question before in different forms, by employees, by investors, by the handful of people who knew the full story. My answer was always the same. "It was about both," I said. "I'm not going to pretend firing him wasn't satisfying. It was. But if that was all I wanted, I could have done it cheaper and easier. I bought Helix because I knew it could succeed, because I knew what it needed. Trent's firing was just the first step in that process." Harold nodded. "That's what I thought. You're a pragmatist." "I try to be." We finished our coffee and talked about other things. His retirement plans, his grandkids, normal stuff. As we were leaving, he shook my hand. "You turned a bad situation into a good outcome," he said. "That's rare. Most people just stay bitter." "Bitterness doesn't build companies," I replied. He smiled. "No, it doesn't. Just last month, 22 months after my firing, the company reached a milestone. Revenue had doubled from where we were when I took over. Employee retention was among the best in the industry. Client satisfaction scores were consistently in the high 90s. We'd become a case study. Business schools reached out asking to profile the turnaround. I declined most of them. I wasn't interested in being a symbol or a story. I was interested in running a good company. But I did agree to one interview. A small industry podcast that focused on operational leadership. They wanted to talk about what makes companies succeed or fail. The host asked me the inevitable question. "You were fired from Helix. then came back and bought it. That's a pretty dramatic arc. How does that feel? I thought about it for a moment. It feels like I did my job, I said. The job I should have been allowed to do in the first place. That was the truth. Not revenge, not vindication. Just work. The podcast aired a few weeks ago. I got several emails from people saying they'd listened. Some congratulations, some questions about leadership philosophy. One email stood out. It was from someone who'd worked with Trent at his previous company, before Helix. They said they'd watched him fail upward for years, finally crashing at Helix, and were glad to see consequences finally catch up with him. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Trent's story wasn't my story anymore. It never really was. He was just a catalyst, a push that forced me to take control of my own trajectory instead of letting someone else dictate it. And that, more than any dollar amount or title, was what mattered. Today, Helix Dynamics isn't just stable, it's thriving. We're competing for contracts against companies twice our size and winning. Our reputation for reliability and quality has spread beyond Ohio. We have clients across 8 states in the Midwest region, and continuing to grow. I'm also in the process of hiring a CEO, a sharp woman named Karen Delacroix, who previously ran operations at a tech firm in Boston. She's exactly what Helix needs. Experienced, strategic, and not interested in ego games. Once she's on board, I'll stay on as chairman and majority owner, but I'll let her run the show. That's the whole point of building a strong team, so you don't have to do everything yourself. With that transition planned, I've started thinking about legacy. Not mine personally, but the company's. What I'm building here needs to outlast me. That's why I'm structuring succession plans. Identifying future leaders. Building redundancy into key positions. Creating systems that don't depend on any single person. Because that's what good leadership does. It makes itself unnecessary. Just yesterday, I was sitting in my office when one of my VPs knocked on the door with news. A major client had specifically requested Helix for a new project because they'd heard about our turnaround story. They said they wanted to work with a company that values stability and competence over flash. That's the reputation we've built. The truth is, I don't regret any of it. Not the firing, not the struggle, not even the lottery win, strange as that sounds. Because all of it, together, led me here, to a place where I have control, purpose, and the satisfaction of knowing I've built something that matters. That's not revenge. That's redemption. Nearly 2 years after walking out of Helix Dynamics with a box of personal items and a bruised ego, I walk into the same building as its owner, leader, and the architect of its resurgence. I don't gloat. Don't need to. The company's success is the only statement worth making. Trent Lawson tried to erase me. Instead, he freed me. And in that freedom, I built something he never could. A company that actually works. People ask me sometimes if I'd do it all over again. If I'd choose the same path, knowing what I know now, the answer is yes. Not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. I learned that competence beats arrogance, that patience beats impulsiveness, that building something sustainable is more satisfying than any short-term win. And I learned that the best revenge isn't making someone suffer, it's making them irrelevant. Trent fired me to prove his power. I bought the company to prove my competence. He's forgotten now. The company isn't. That's the difference between being loud and being effective. True strength isn't loud, it's consistent. I chose effective. If you enjoyed this story, like this video, and leave your comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell to receive notifications of new stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.